Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Thursday night, and this is Farage at Large, live from St Austell. Please welcome your host, Nigel Farage.
Good evening. I'm here in St Austell. Again, a very enthusiastic crowd. We'll be talking Middle East, we'll be talking banking, and we'll be talking many things Cornish. And joining me on Talking Pints tonight, Cornish rugby legend Phil Vickery. But before all of that, let's get the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you, and good evening to you. Well, the Conservative MP Crispin Blunt has been arrested on suspicion of rape and the possession of controlled substances. The MP for Reigate identified himself on social media this afternoon as the man Surrey Police did detain in Hawley yesterday morning. Well, Surrey Police has confirmed the man was released on conditional police bail pending their further inquiries. Mr Blunt has already been removed from the Tory party and asked to stay away from Parliament. The former minister said he'll cooperate fully with the ongoing police investigation and is confident he won't be charged. Meanwhile, also in the news tonight, the UK's border force is currently in Egypt, with the Prime Minister confirming officers are ready to help British nationals escape Gaza when the border reopens. And Cabinet ministers held an emergency Cobra meeting this morning to address the escalating crisis in the Middle East. The government's pushing for a pause in the fighting, rejecting calls for a full ceasefire to facilitate aid reaching Palestinians. And in Gaza itself, the Health Ministry says the death toll has now passed 7,000, and they say that includes almost 3,000 children. Meanwhile, Iran's foreign minister has waded into the conflict, claiming Hamas is ready to release hostages and the world should support the release of 6,000 Palestinian prisoners. And that comes as the Arab nations released a joint statement today condemning what they're describing as the forced displacement and collective punishment of Palestinians. Israel maintains it's only targeting the terrorist group Hamas. Now, in other news today, in the United States, a manhunt is continuing after 18 people were killed by a gunman and 13 more left injured. Police in the state of Maine have named 40-year-old Robert Card as a person of interest, describing him as armed and dangerous. The US Army has confirmed that he's in the US Army Reserves. The shootings happened in at least 2 locations in the city of Lewiston. The US President Joe Biden has responded, urging Republican lawmakers to enact stronger gun controls. Today, the Prime Minister warned that artificial intelligence could threaten human extinction on the same scale as global pandemics or nuclear war. His comments came after touring Moorfields Eye Hospital in London, which uses AI to diagnose sight problems. Rishi Sunak says humanity could lose control of AI, and criminals and terrorist groups could use it to spread fear and destruction. He's also announced, though, the formation of the world's first AI Safety Institute in the UK to explore the risks and share its data with the world. Now, remembrance poppies will be plastic-free this year and recyclable in the first redesign of the iconic emblem in a generation. It's all part of a move by the Royal British Legion to reduce its production of single-use plastics. From today, volunteers and supermarkets will be selling the historic symbol, worn annually to honour the service and sacrifice of Britain's armed forces in conflicts over decades. Each poppy sold raises money to support surviving veterans as well as serving personnel. And you may notice I'm wearing an old-fashioned poppy today. That's because we're using up last year's box. We're waiting for our delivery of those brand new poppies. You're watching GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. This is Britain's news channel, crossing live now to St Austell in Cornwall.
Good evening. I'm joining you live from Cornwall this evening. We're going to be discussing international issues, Cornish issues and national issues. And one issue that affects absolutely everybody is whether they have a bank account or not, because without one, you become a non-person. You simply can't function. I've been campaigning on this, as you may well know, since the middle of this summer. I like to think with some effect. The National Westminster Bank Board met today, and we know their figures will be released, their quarterly figures will be released at 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. We haven't had a statement at all out of the NatWest board. You know the NatWest board. That's the NatWest board that insisted that Dame Alison Rose should stay in position despite leaking the details of my banking situation to the BBC's business correspondent. Now, that same NatWest board must have found themselves in a bit of a pickle today, because the ICO report that was released last night from the Information Commissioner's office said that, yes, Alison Rose had very clearly broken the law. So we've heard nothing at all. We're also waiting for the Travers Smith report. This is the so-called independent report that will be put into the whole saga, and it's coming from a firm whose emeritus chair, Chris Hale, has described Brexiteers as racists and xenophobes. So we can look forward to a jolly independent report, can't we? I've seen the report, I've read the report, I'm not really allowed to say what's in it, but I don't think it's going to actually bear much fruit. You see, what really matters in a situation like this is not just the ICO, who did say they wouldn't take action until the report had been released, so I'm going to keep the pressure on them, but also the Financial Conduct Authority. These are the people running financial services in this country, which affects every single individual, rich and poor. And they seem to be more concerned over the last few years with pushing issues such as diversity and inclusion, and of course climate change, more than actually worrying about whether people have got proper financial services, including banking. So we'll find out more at 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. You may be thinking that maybe Nigel's getting a bit obsessive about this. Well, you know what? There's a million people have had their bank accounts removed over the course of the last few years, and many, many of them small businesses that have struggled horribly since. By the end of this year, they will have closed 3 out of 5 high street branches around the country. Many of them almost don't want to take cash that comes from local businesses. This fight is not just for me. This fight is about a fairer, freer society. And do you know something? I'm going to keep on fighting because I will not let them get away with it. OK, now, the situation in the Middle East becomes graver by the day. Let's go straight to Tel Aviv to join GB News' security editor, Mark White. Mark, good evening. So last night, as I understand it, the first serious Israeli incursions into Gaza. What scale was that actually on?
Well, pretty significant. The largest incursion into northern Gaza since the war began, with dozens of tanks, bulldozers used to break through that border fence to allow those tanks and soldiers into Gaza. This was an operation that was aimed at taking out Hamas defensive positions. So when that eventual ground war takes place, then hopefully there will not be as many traps waiting for the Israeli Defense Forces. But they know, listen, when they go into Gaza, it's going to be very difficult, very bloody, and a long campaign. And it's been quite an eventful day here in Tel Aviv as well. Today we had 2 very large rocket barrages into this city, the 4th large rocket barrage into Tel Aviv in just 3 days. We had to go to the shelter a couple of times just to give you a flavour of what it was like. I just want to play you a little bit of the sound and the pictures of the sirens going off in central Tel Aviv. Take a look at this. And you know, Nigel, this is really quite a remarkable system, the alert system and the Iron Dome system that the Israelis have, because it's so precise that actually rockets can come in to the south or the east of Tel Aviv, and the alert doesn't come off here in central Tel Aviv, but it does go off if they are targeted specifically at your location, as they were twice today. And we know that although the Iron Dome missile defense system is incredibly accurate, it doesn't get everything. And when you get a very significant barrage coming in, like we did the last few days, 2 rockets did make it through. They struck apartment blocks. 4 people were injured last night. Another building was very badly damaged today. Luckily, no one was injured there.
Mark, you know, what I see on the international stage, given that we're now told there have been 7,000 people that have been killed in Gaza, we're told, you know, by reputable news sources that many of them are children, is that we see from the European Union, the United Nations, everywhere, even the countries that most strongly tend to support Israel, are beginning to get slightly nervous. Are the Israeli government beginning to feel a little bit lonely?
Well, I don't think they're feeling lonely quite yet, but they're absolutely aware, Nigel, that it was always going to be the case that a couple of weeks on from this absolutely horrific attack that took place on October the 7th, that the images coming out of Gaza would be the images that would then dominate the news agenda. Hamas knows this as well. Hamas is well used to putting its rocket launchers and other terrorist infrastructure right among the civilian population here. So when Israel responds to the rockets being launched here towards Israel, then often civilians are caught up in that, and there is a heavy toll. But that very cynically plays into the Hamas playbook as well, because they know they get the international community then piling the pressure on Israel, calling for a ceasefire, where Israel is adamant there will be no ceasefire. They are determined to get into Gaza at some point. There is, we believe, a delay in the ground war to allow the Americans to get their missile defense systems up and running around the region, because they know there'll be retaliatory attacks, not just on Israel, but on Israel's allies. But once that is in place, Israel will go ahead, according to the Prime Minister, with this ground war, and their stated aim is to destroy Hamas. And they need to do it. They know they need to do it on the ground, Nigel, because the fact that we're still getting very large barrages of rockets coming over shows you that there's still a capability, a capacity with Hamas, and you can only really deal with that by going in and dealing with them on the ground.
Mark White, thank you as ever for your report direct from Tel Aviv. And Mark is right, of course, they have to win the ground war. The problem is that in Gaza, much of this will be an underground war. We understand that Hamas have built over 300 miles of tunnels. We also understand from witness evidence that that is where the hostages are being held to. It doesn't matter what you have, fighting an underground war in Gaza is going to be pretty horrendous for both sides. I haven't changed my mind, folks. I think whatever the historical rights and wrongs of this, I think what happened on the 7th of October was truly shocking and ghastly in every way. And I find it absolutely reprehensible that there are so many people in our country who refuse to condemn that. So I think that actually Netanyahu has very little option. He has to go and try and take out Hamas. I get that. I just fear, as I hinted with that question to Mark White a moment ago, that as the death toll in Gaza rises, and as we see the breakup, sadly, of the Abraham Accords negotiated by the Trump government, and the fact that Saudi Arabia was very close to become part of that club, I just fear and worry that Israel will find itself actually becoming increasingly isolated on the world stage. That's my big fear for Israel as we go ahead from here. As I say, the history of it is the history of it. None of us can change any of that. We all perhaps emotionally take sides, but what happened on the 7th of October in Israel was truly shocking. In a moment, we're going to talk all things Cornwall, including second homes. Rich Londoners coming down, buying up the entirety of seafronts. What does it mean for local people living in Cornwall? But more importantly, what can actually be done about it? See you in a couple of minutes.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the dinosaur hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys. On GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, here we are, back in St Austell. We're joined now by David Haig. And David is a human rights lawyer who spent many years living in the Middle East. But far more important than that to this crowd, he's a Cornish parish councillor living in Penzance. David, let's begin with Cornwall. You know, I have noticed over the years that I've been travelling down here, I do see a lot more Cornish flags. And I hear people saying to me, they talk about England, by which they mean over the Tamar, that funny lot that live over the Tamar. But people really do. And now, you know, I think only about 3% of Cornwall are genuine Cornish separatists. But the important point is that, you know, we've now got this unitary council in Cornwall with some degree of devolved powers. There's even talk of a mayor, perhaps. I mean, is devolution... I mean, I was in Wales last night, where it seems to me devolution is actually working out rather badly. Is there a real demand for devolution down here?
I think certainly there's a campaign. There was always a campaign. I think it was 10 years ago that the Cornish were granted, protected nation status by Europe, as I'm sure you're familiar with. But what has been done with that since? So I think everyone's very I mean I wasn't born here, so I'll never be classed as proper Cornish. I mean I think you need to be generations to do that. But I went to school here, and I think there's definitely a national an identity here.
Well, you went to school here. You live
a language, a flag.
And you're still not Cornish.
No, I never. No,
it's a very high bar.
No, it's a very, very high bar. But I think we need to use that the national identity that we've got and actually do something with it. And what's been done in the last 10 years, not very much. If you live down here, which a lot of my friends that I went to school with are here, many problems. Whether it's you mentioned earlier, whether it's housing, the second homes, things like that, causing problems, jobs, investment. There's so many more important things than whether or not we want to be an independent nation, as it were. I think.
But nothing wrong with the Cornish flag. Nothing wrong with being proud of the county, and it is a very beautiful county. And that's the problem, isn't it? It's got this amazing landscape and seascape, and it's attractive for all sorts of outdoor pursuits. And as London, in the last few decades, has got relatively so much richer than the rest of the country, people have come here on holiday. Oh, I'd rather like that house. I could buy that for a holiday home, or we could just spend a few weeks a year here. And you understand why people would do that.
Yeah.
The kids want to go surfing, or they want to, walk the Cornish cliff path, whatever it may be. Now, you were saying to me before we came on air that you were living in Lamorna, where the place was literally like a morgue in the winter.
Well, that's the thing, is it's a blessing and a curse. I mean, the beauty is we all live here. We have a lot of people coming in for tourists. But, I lived in a little place called Lamorna, a very, very picturesque fishing village. And one lady died, and literally one of my neighbours died, and all the cottages, every single one on the seafront, was either a second home or a holiday let. And then that in the summer it's fine. I mean, you don't know who your neighbours are, but it keeps changing. But then in the winter, it's a ghost town. The local pub closes, the garage, the shops, the schools. Then you don't have children. The community dies. But then how do you resolve that? Because it's an impossible...
It's very difficult. Well, there's good and bad everywhere. Now, I went out this afternoon, earlier, into Mevergissi, and produced this little film talking about a couple of these issues, including housing, and it's very relevant to what we've just discussed. There we are, traditional Cornish pasty, which is great here in Mevergissi in the rain. Trouble is, even here, that shop was card only. What is going on? Don't kill cash. So Mevagissey was really made on the back of the Cornish pilchard, or we call it the sardine today. But the fishing industry here now has had a real boom, a real boost. You can see some fishing boats behind me, but a lot of them are out right now, and guess what they're after? Tuna. Blue fin tuna. Last 10 years in a row, huge numbers of tuna coming into these waters, giving a lot of jobs for local people, anglers coming down, paying to catch, tag and release them. But for the first time since we left the European Union, we've now got a commercial licence. And the fish you're seeing now in these pictures were landed here in Mevagissey just yesterday. The tuna boom is really good news for Cornwall. Well, look at it. It's beautiful, isn't it? The houses are great, but there's a problem. It's happening all over Cornwall. Rich Londoners look at these properties and think, I'd love to have one of those as my holiday home, meaning that for locals to live here becomes really, well, not just difficult, frankly impossible. One thing Mevagissey has got right is behind the village, up on the hill, they built a whole load of new housing, affordable housing for local people only. And that means you come to this harbour, you come to this village and its pubs in the winter and its shops, and there's still a sense of real Cornish community. Unlike Padstow, which in the winter is now literally devoid of anybody. And it's a real challenge for local councils everywhere. How do you deal with the influx of money? You want the money during the tourist season, but you also need somewhere for local people to live. So there are two answers to this, David, I think. One is that you double people's council tax, which may be happening from next year, or you quadruple council tax on second homes. But the other approach is the Mevagissey approach, where you build housing and you say only local people can buy these houses. Shouldn't this new unitary authority here in Cornwall be doing a bit more of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what's happening at the moment isn't working. I mean, when I look at the friends that I went to school with, I've even got friends and living in bell tents in their parents' gardens because they can't afford either rents, which are extremely expensive now, or a house. So something needs to be done, and it's not been done, and that's the issue. And we also need to see, we need to increase the wages of people in Cornwall, as well as make the houses more available and cheaper, but we need to bring investment into Cornwall so the wages of the people go up as well. And those are things that are not being done, and they do need to be done.
No, there's a lot that needs to be done.
Yeah.
The tuna boom is good news.
Yeah.
A Brexit benefit. We weren't allowed to catch tuna as members of the European Union. Now we are. And our commercial quota at this stage is very small compared to the French and Spanish, but it is certainly out of season. Very good news for Cornwall. David, you lived for 10 years in the Middle East. You've got friends on the Israeli side of the conflict, friends on the other side of the conflict. Where do you think we go from here?
Yeah, it really is one of those impossible situations. I mean, what happened, in Israel a couple of weeks ago is absolutely terrible. And Hamas are terrorists. I'm not the BBC. I'm more than happy to say it.
The BBC wouldn't say that.
But it's a problem because like you said, I mean, I trained at a Jewish law firm and I lived in the Middle East for 10 years. So I've seen both sides, and there are arguments on both sides. Terrorism is never acceptable. Loss of civilian life is never acceptable. How do we resolve it? And that's the problem. And you've got so many other, as you know better than me, players in either side and proxy wars going on. I think it's a very difficult situation for us all in the world now. We need to watch very carefully.
I just sense, as I said earlier, that as the casualties mount in Gaza, the international support for Israel will and we're seeing it already. Calls for ceasefires. It's beginning to diminish. I just feel that Israel's going to find itself in a very tough position. But then they're surrounded by people, I mean, Hamas being one of them, that literally want to wipe them off the face of the earth.
Well, absolutely, but you've got this new dynamic now. You've got other countries that have normalised relations. You've seen Arab countries normalise relations with Israel, which we didn't have before. So, is that actually we're going to see something different because of that? I mean, but like I said, yeah.
I have to say, I think one of the reasons for the Iranian-sponsored Hamas attack is because of the success of the UAE and Israel normalising relations. Tourism, trade, investment, Saudi Arabia about to join. I think this was deliberately done.
I agree, yeah.
I think to break this up. David, a final point. When I came out in the summer, as it were, as being debanked, lots of other people said, well, we've been debanked too. And then I found it had happened to a vast number of people. You too have been debanked.
No, I haven't. And before, you know, because it was almost like a dirty little secret until you came out, because you didn't tell anybody.
Yeah, because you see, I don't care. I just say what I...
I'm
unembarrassable.
I mean, I had my accounts closed for a connection to a Middle Eastern princess that I helped. And you know, at the time, you don't want to talk about it because it does seem like a dirty little secret. But then you've made it now something that we can all talk about. So we can all come out as debanked. So thank you for that.
Well, I'll keep going. I'll go on with the campaign. David, thank you. Keep up the great work as a local councillor here in Cornwall. In a moment, it'll be Barrage the Farage, where the members of the public will take me on. I better get myself ready.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the dinosaur hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these 3.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
OK, it's time for Barrage the Farage here in St Austell in Cornwall. And our first questioner is 17-year-old Georgia. Now, you know, I don't know what they're going to ask me. I promise this is not staged. Georgia, go for it.
So, as one of the youngest members in the audience and wanting to pursue a career in the Royal Air Force, how would you win my vote in support of the military?
Well, it's a terrible thing, isn't it? But that actually, historically, we think it'll be the Conservative Party that will be strong on defences, and it'll be the Labour Party that'll be weak on defence. And actually, many times in the last 50 years, it's always been the other way round. We have seen a really very disturbing decline in the number of personnel that we have in all branches of the armed forces. In some elements of it, very bad morale. You know, good people leaving the 3 services, and that's a disaster. Georgia, there are two things here. It's very easy to say money's the solution. It's very easy to say, you know, we should be 3% plus of GDP spent on defence. And in terms of NATO, that's important because America's been paying its way and our friends in Europe haven't. But it's not just about spending money, it's about how you spend money. And I do honestly think that in just so many, whether it's the NHS or whatever it is, we can spend huge amounts of money and actually get poor levels of delivery for that money. So I can't wave a magic wand at this, but I do think we've treated our forces pretty badly. And after 13 years of Conservative government, I feel we're much weaker than we were before. But you're going to join still, yeah?
Hopefully, yes, sir.
And what do you want to be, a pilot, an engineer? What's your plan?
A pilot, sir.
A pilot. Georgia, you go for it, and the very best. OK, Paul. Good evening.
Hello, Nigel. In 2002, the BBC ran a TV programme and poll for the 100 greatest Britons. Number 1 was Churchill, and number 2 was Isambard Kingdom Brunel. If the BBC was to run the same programme now, who do you think would be number 1?
Well, I think, despite what many would want you to think, and the attempt to really destroy Churchill's reputation, which we've seen going on at a number of levels, quite extraordinary. I still think it would be Churchill, and I think Nelson probably would be Isambard Kingdom Brunel. I think Nelson would come second. I mean, what was your thinking?
My thinking would be Churchill, because what he did and how we have our freedom today is through that man.
Absolutely. I agree with you, Carol. Thank you. Yeah, no, and, you know, Black Lives Matter or whoever it is can damage his statues in London, but I don't think the great British public have changed their minds, Paul, one little bit. Let's go to Carol.
Good evening, Nigel. Welcome to Cornwall.
Thank you.
Do you think it's time to finish the remembrance service and the march past at the cenotaph, where our Prime Ministers, past and present, bow their heads in respect when they are giving away our country? Shame on them all.
Well, Carol, you know, it's very easy to criticise any government at any time. I felt myself, when I was a lot younger, that we were kind of giving our country away to Europe piece by piece, and our independence and our rights of self-government. And indeed, I felt, you know, much of what we'd perhaps sacrificed in previous generations. So I felt that. Look, you can like politicians, you can dislike politicians. We do still live in something of a democracy, though I'd like to see the electoral system changed and much else. But overall, I mean, it's quite interesting, actually. I think that Remembrance Day services, whether it be at the cenotaph or around the rest of the country, these days, they're pretty well attended. You know, people do actually care about this stuff, and whilst Afghanistan and Iraq were absolutely awful, I think the fact that so many young people got killed or maimed reconnected us with this concept of sacrifice and what going to war actually means. So, no, I wouldn't scrap any of the services, and love them or hate them, I'd still let the ex-Prime Ministers attend. I'm sensing, Carol, you would take a rather harsher line.
Yes, I just think there are a lot of hypocrites. They say one thing, bow their heads in respect for all those young men that died. And what are they doing to our country? What they fought for? Well, freedom. My dad was a prisoner of war for 3 years.
Yeah.
What would he say if he was living now?
Well, Carol, you're probably going to get quite a lot of sympathy for that view in the room, that people do.
I just want somebody to do something.
well, it was once said, you know, it was said before that we get the politicians we deserve. We get the politicians that we vote for. But well, there is some truth in that. Under the system we have, I still believe personally that if we change the electoral system, we'd get some different kinds of people reaching the top of the tree. And you know, that's what I would passionately like to see. But, and do you approve of the poppy having no plastic in it?
No, I do not.
Well, go on. I'll be wearing mine from tomorrow. Carol, thank you. I'll be wearing mine from tomorrow. There's always this debate about when you should start wearing a poppy. And some people wear them very early and others, and I've normally worn them from the 1st of November. But apparently the Royal British Legion say we should wear them from the last Friday in October. So I'm going to put my poppy on tomorrow in accordance with the Royal British Legion. OK, number 4 is Elmars. Elmars, good evening.
What's your take on the cost of the energy price to working class people? Like in my case, my bills rose from £800 per year to over £2,000 due to sanctions on Russia. Is there any chance of this going down soon before the old and the poor have to decide if to have fuel or food on the table? Thank you.
I think that's an issue that directly really scares, and I mean scares, millions of people.
I agree.
I saw a piece in the business section of today's Daily Telegraph after the last round of auctions for wind farms in the North Sea failed because the government weren't paying a high enough price, according to the people that want to provide wind energy. And one of the biggest firms said, we need 70% more, a 70% increase in the electricity price the government pays us to build more wind farms. And I think, Elmars, this is one of the biggest rackets. The more we go for renewables, the more we're told we're saving the world, the higher our bills become. Because your bills are loaded with subsidy to pay our renewal obligations certificates. So I don't want us to go back to, burning really filthy coal, and all the rest of it. I don't want us to do that, but I think there's a balance to be struck. And I just think that the net zero strategy, this country, is being taken down by politicians of all parties. They all seem to agree. I think people like you are picking up the price for it. And I think there's going to be a political backlash at some point.
Well, we definitely are picking up the price.
Yeah. How do you feel about it? I mean...
Poor.
Poor, yeah. No. Elmars, you are not...
Walk around the supermarket, walk around any shop, go and fill up your car with petrol or pay your gas bill or whatever. Everything has gone through the roof.
Yeah.
Have pensions gone through the roof?
Yeah.
Not the last time I looked.
Yeah. No, it's a very fair point, and it worries a lot of people. Thank you.
Thank you.
OK, and finally, Kevin. Kevin, good evening.
Hi there, Nigel. How can we get the government to prioritise NHS dentistry? It's a real issue here in the southwest, and a lot of people haven't got access to an NHS dentist, and we need to get it so that everyone in the country has access to an NHS dentist in a local town. When I was looking on there earlier today, Southampton was one of the closest places I've had all the silly oils to get a dentist with the NHS. Now, I did myself and my family had an NHS dentist in Newquay, just round the corner, and that went on for some years. It was perfect, but they've sent me a letter.
I'm tempted to say, what NHS dentists? Because they don't really exist anymore. I get your point. I had a former boss of the British Dental Association on my show last year, and he said, dentistry can't win you general elections, but it might help to lose you general elections. And there's already great disquiet about getting GP appointments. That's become harder and harder and harder. With dentistry, all I can tell you, honestly, Kevin, at the moment, there is no government plan to reverse it. No government plan to reverse it, and therefore, what you have to do, we're back to really Elmar's point, is you have to pay for it. And it's an awful lot of money at a time when people are hard up. I wish I could give you a magic bullet on it. I can't. It's very low down at the moment, political priorities, but it should be a lot higher. And Kevin, I understand your frustration. Thank you very much indeed. OK, in a moment, it will be time for Talking Pints, and I will be joined by England rugby legend, but more important for this audience, Cornishman, yep, absolutely, Phil Vickery will be here in just a moment.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows,
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I know he's a bit of a Cornish legend and a bit of a rugby hero, and of course, he was part of a winning World Cup team. Phil Vickery, welcome to Talking Football.
I'm going to take that. That was for me. That was all for
No, I know it was all for you, absolutely. No, it really was, and well, very good too. Now, Phil, you know, Cornwall, farming, family, it's really a huge part of you, isn't it?
Well, it was, you know, it's very much the foundation stone of me, really. You know, I grew up on a family farm just up in Bude, just north of Bude, which my brother now still farms with his family, and I just came across rugby when I went to comprehensive school, didn't do the mini juniors thing. That was kind of unheard of.
But I guess when you grew up in a farm, I guess the family have got you working from a very young age, haven't they?
Actually, well, I probably shouldn't say this, but I will. My father actually made it very difficult for me to play rugby because he couldn't understand why you wouldn't be working on a Saturday.
Yeah.
And, you know, and that was, you know, you were doing this and you need to work on a Saturday. And, of course, I fell in love with rugby and through my teens, and then I wanted to play, and at Bude, and I went down to Redruth, and, you know, I was on my journey. Then I got into the school system and Mum taking me everywhere.
And Dad not liking it?
No, well, no. I had to get a relief milkman to milk the cows on a Saturday for me to go and play rugby.
And that, in a way, that says something about small family farms, doesn't it? I think those that are not engaged or understand the farming community, it is a blimmin' tough life.
The one thing that farmers are is resilient. And yes, there's huge issues around farming with well-being and the mental health, with the pressures on listening to food prices and energy prices.
Yeah.
It hits everyone. There's no winners here, well, apart from big corporates, but there's no winners in this. But as a child, as soon as you could do something, you did something. And if your job was to stand down back lane and a hole in the hedge when you're drenching sheep day, and that is what you did. You stood there. But even silly things, you look back now and people, they say you can't compare being a pro sportsman with farming. I said, well, you can, because every day you've got to get up and go. There's no, I don't feel like it tomorrow, or it's dark, it's wet, it's freezing, the electric's gone out. It's boom. Every day, relentless, repeat over and over and over.
And what was it? What was the quality, do you think, that made you good at rugby?
Probably being told that I can't do something, because I'm a cantankerous, awkward, stubborn bugger.
Yes, you do have that reputation.
But I just fell in love. For me, the rugby was a sideshow. I fell in love with rugby. For once, I was the big kid at school. Without getting too deep about it, I was a big kid at school. Got picked last for most things. Five-a-side football, I was always a goalie, because just by default I filled half of it, So, but I took it anyway, and it was a simple thing actually. It was a teacher, the PE teacher at Bude School when I went there. It was Mr. Opie. He actually taught my father, and I said, sorry, sir, I don't know how to play rugby. And he just put his arm around me. And he said, don't worry, I'll show you. And I got involved. It was really positive. It didn't break me down. I'm a little bit spirited. He nurtured me and just gave me confidence. And suddenly, it's like, wow, camaraderie, the boys together, singing, song. We are from Bude, this is us. Went down to Bude Rugby Club, same thing, welcome, come in, yeah, come on. Oh, we weren't any good, we were rubbish, but we are from Bude and we are the best, and it was that club, it was the emblem, it was a badge to be part of my town and to represent, and that for me was hugely important. But then when you start thinking about Cornwall, what it stands for, fishermen, miners, passion, Trelawney's Army, those 15 pieces of gold in that badge. We are from Cornwall. I fell in love with that, and yes, my career and what it did, and going up to Gloucester, very similar, very, working class city, Gloucester, passionate, love you and hate you at the same time, which I kind of loved about it. And then I went on into England with.
Well, you played many, over 70 caps for England, and you were there at a period when England rugby was right at the top.
Well, a golden era. I was very, very privileged to have been part of that, and around some incredible people, but led by some incredible people too.
And 2003, obviously a very special moment.
Yeah. And ironically, I talk about 2003. It's how crazy my little life is. So Mum was the person who took me everywhere. In a little Fiesta 1.1 Popular Plus, up and down,
How did you get in it?
I know, everywhere. And sadly, my mum didn't come out to Australia for the final, but my dad actually rang me. And bear in mind, Dad had only watched me 5 or 6 times my whole rugby career. And which is not because he didn't want to, he's just happy at home, TV, busy, working. And Dad came out to the final. And he flew out, but at the time you couldn't get tickets or the flights and the planes were all booked up, and he came out, and my dad
was
you were
there, and of course 2007 it didn't quite happen, but and you had the honour of leading, captaining a country, which is an amazing thing.
To captain your country is an incredible thing, and for me actually 2007, although we didn't win it, actually means more to me, because we lost 36-0 against South Africa in the pool stages, and we were deemed the worst rugby team ever. I accidentally kicked somebody and got banned for a couple of games.
Accidentally?
Accidentally. Well, it was either be kicked or score a try, so I took the right option. But to come back and to fight, and I remember for me the special moment was, and this is for me what the love of sport was, in Marseille in the quarter-final against Australia. They were down to beat us, and of course they were, and we stood up to be counted, and it was grit, determination, honour, passion, pride, and that's what done it. And then suddenly France in Paris. I don't need to be encouraged against France, because I grew up watching Southwest Television, blocking the tunnel up, not taking our beef, bullying our fishermen. I grew up watching, all right, you buggers, you're having it, and to beat France in Paris. It's funny, I go back to, I played the 99 Rugby World Cup, and people say, what do you remember about that? So I'll tell you the one thing I remember. We played South Africa in the quarter-final in Paris. We got knocked out by Yanni Dia, 5 drop goals. What do you remember about that game? I'll tell you what I remember. It was, or whatever, for England fans in the stadium was buy British beef. Yeah. It was a great big sign, and I'll never forget that.
Brilliant. Well, on the theme of beef, on the theme of beef, you were known as a rugby player as Raging Bull, which I think Jake LaMotta, the boxer, had before. But, I mean, you know, Phil, there you are. You know, your rugby career's over, great career, it's over, and suddenly you're winning MasterChef.
Yeah, well...
How does this happen?
Well, to be honest, Nigel, I didn't go on to win it. I've always watched the show. I'd always loved food. I grew up around food, farmhouse kitchen, nan cooking, baking, pies, pasties, quiches, flans, tarts, buns, saffron buns, splits. It was just all happening. So I loved food. We had our own gardens. Grandad was my person. He was a guy who looked after us, really. He's growing and nurture. I'm a herdsman, so I love tractors because I'm a farmer, but I'm a herdsman. I like that nurture. And food is part of it. Yes, being a pro sportsman, food becomes very transactional, becomes numbers, amounts. But when I'm cooking, it doesn't matter what's going on in the world. I'm cooking. And I use it, it's a bit of therapy more than anything, and I finish and they ask me to come on, and you know, the old classic with the researchers, for the girls and boys in the room, the researchers come, they want to find out about you, and you realise after about a minute they actually know more about you than you know about yourself.
I know. But it was an amazing thing to do, and you've done it, and you've gone on from there, and you've got sports brands and restaurants, and I mean, just amazing. But
food, farming and rugby, although very different, are actually very similar.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's communities coming in, coming together, celebrating. What do we celebrate with? Good drink and food.
Yeah.
Conversation.
Yeah.
That is rugby, really.
Banter, fun.
You know, that's what farming is. What was a kitchen? It was an office. It was a place of celebration.
I think it's brilliant. Well, you brought so much. You brought so much to everything you've done, Phil, and I reckon this crowd have really loved having you. Thank you.
Thank you.
For joining me.
Thank you.
It is that time. I don't know how these boys do it, but Bell and Sperling, every single time, it's a new song. Take it away, guys.
600 pages are finally here. They tried to close him down, but here's a word in your ear. One way or another, he's gonna find ya. He's gonna get you, Nigel. He's gonna find ya. He's gonna get ya. He's gonna get ya. Said they'd bring him down a peg or two. They thought they'd throw a milkshake. They haven't got a clue, 'cause this is Nigel. He's gonna find ya. He's gonna get ya. You really didn't think it through, did ya? Nat West, you tried to debank, but you really ain't worth a Barclays. Hey, Nigel says just how it is. You tried your luck, and Nigel says just as it is. But you really came unstuck, 'cause Nigel's always on the ball. Nigel says...
I put in a subject access request to NatWest Bank.
Nigel says...
Just imagine the poor darlings at NatWest.
Nigel says...
Milkshake.
Good evening, it's Alex Burkill here with your latest GB News weather forecast. It could be a bit foggy for some of us tonight, but there is further wet and blustery weather to come through the rest of the week. Low pressure sitting just to the west of the UK is bringing a showery, blustery theme to many parts of the UK. However, it's a front across the northeast that's already brought persistent rain for some here and will continue to do so across eastern parts of Scotland overnight. Cloud towards eastern parts of England will lower, bring some murkiness, some fog for some here, and elsewhere clear spells, allowing for some fog patches to develop too. But temperatures not dropping a huge amount overnight, many places holding up in high single digits. So some fog, some mist around first thing on Friday morning. That will gradually clear. Persistent rain continuing across eastern parts of Scotland, likely to cause some further issues. Otherwise, it's a day of showers for many, starting off around western and southern coastal parts, but spreading inland as we go into the afternoon, and some of them could be heavy, possibly even thundery. Temperatures around around average for the time of year. Highs of around 15 Celsius in the south, a little bit cooler than this further north. Staying showery as we go through into Saturday, and some of those showers could still be heavy at times, most likely towards the southeast, where we're likely to see some impacts from those. Also more rain across eastern parts of Scotland, totals really continuing to build up as we go through the weekend. More unsettled weather then to come as we go through the weekend into the beginning of next week, but also something a little bit colder in the north. Bye-bye.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the dinosaur hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I. So you